everyone. I want to welcome you to another Credit Safe webinar. My name is Nathan Kolb, and I will be your host today, as I am most weeks. And I hope that you can continue to join us as we go through all of these different webinars that we have planned for you. So to get this all started too, we're going to be talking today about Q1. So we're going to be talking about what is going on in credit, in the credit community for Q1 of 2021. So the first question I have for everybody here as I get ready to introduce our speakers is, anybody that's here, how has your company, how has your job fared in Q1 of 2021? What have you seen? Have things been up since last year, down? Are we staying about the same, growing, falling? What are we seeing? Just drop your answer into that Q&A section at the bottom, and we'll talk about that as we go. But nobody came here to hear me speak. So drop your answers in there and get ready to hear our speakers today. Ava and Katie are here with us. They are far better equipped to answer questions about what's going on in credit in Q1 than I am. So I am just here to facilitate and ask some questions. But Ava, why don't you start out? Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us why you're here, and give us a little background.
Great, thank you so much, Nathan. So welcome everyone. My name is Eva. I'm a solution architect at a German software company called Sarala. I'm based in the Netherlands in Europe, so it's already quite late for me, but I'm really pleased to be here today with you. I'm like everybody else, working from home, not going anywhere, speak to my cats every day, and trying to get through things whilst I'm keeping focused on my credit work. So that's me in a nutshell. I think Katie, your turn.
Oh, thank you, Eva. So thank you, Credit Safe and Nathan, for having me on today. And, I always enjoy talking to you guys. So I am Katie Keach. I am a senior credit and collections executive with over a decade of experience, especially with logistics and supply chain. I currently hold the position of Chief Operating Officer at Central Credit Audit and Statewide Tax Recovery. They are both debt collection companies for the consumer and commercial markets, in addition to being the CEO of my own consulting company, Full Advantage, where I help organizations write credit policy and procedures. And I welcome everybody to our chat today.
Look at you. We were saying Katie was having a diva day, and here she is just welcoming everyone to her space. She's taken over. I don't need to be here anymore. Ava can just talk to her cats, and we'll all be good. Everybody will just be happy.
I'll bring them in.
There we go. We'll bring them on. They would steal the show, and it would not be worth me being here. So we've got a few folks, and we've got a bunch of different answers actually coming in on what actually has happened. We've got everybody, saying different things. Actually, each answer that I've received so far on how was Q1 for you has been different, which I think kind of sums up Q1. It's been all over the place. It's been all over the map. I don't know that anybody could have predicted what happened. Nobody certainly seemed to predict it right. From the answers here, we've got down from last year, but up from the quarters prior. We've got way up. We've got stuff's changing all the time, so we don't really even know right now. We're doing great. Like, everything seems to be good. We're just coming up roses right now. Stuff's just growing. And then other people that we're just seeing a downward trend. Like, we're just seeing it go down. So we're kind of all over the map. And I think that sums up Q1, right? That's what we've been seeing. Everything has been all over the place. So, I'm just going to ask it, even though I kind of led you on that question. What are you seeing for kind of overall businesses, for kind of the overarching economy and all of that in Q1? And Katie, why don't you start, since Ava went first last time? What are you seeing, especially in the US? Where do we seem to be at?
Yeah, so you totally hit the nail on the head, and I'm going to give my answer on various perspectives, because I have my own consulting clients that are, seeing a need to pivot. The credit insurance community has really tightened up the reins, so they're really looking to write their own credit policy at this point, learn how to extend credit, trying to weather the storm that is coming. I want to make sure that everybody understands we aren't through it, and I think we haven't even seen it yet, to be honest, in a lot of cases, I should say. From a sales perspective, my clients are seeing, sales are starting to come back in Q1, just kind of starting to be a little bit more comfortable with the spend. And then from a debt collection experience, we did very, very well. We had a record-breaking month and a record-breaking quarter, to be honest with you, from a collections and a profit standpoint. So I would definitely say there are businesses turning over debt. They're knowing when to cut that bait and not hang on to it too long. And for those that are doing that, I think they're weathering the storm pretty well. That's starting to brew. I always like to say that. But then also we were looking at, growing, and we're starting to see people invest in their processes, procedures, techniques, all of that.
Okay. And Ava, anything different from your perspective, or more of the same, or where are we
at? I think it pretty much sounds the same, right? It's a global issue. And I think everywhere we see the same kind of trends, the same issues, the same bottlenecks, also the same positive trends, like consumer spending when it goes to going to the DIY store. That all goes really well, those industries. You look at aviation, all these other industries that are really flattened. And if you were already on the downside at the start of the last year, it was going to be pretty tough to get through that year if you didn't have your house in order. I think those organizations were maybe not perfect, but reasonable, and managed to get government aid, for example, to get through that rough patch, have managed to actually get out of it. And here, at least here in the Netherlands, I'm from the Netherlands, so I follow it quite closely here, but I think throughout the EU region, you will notice that a lot of businesses are actually really improving now, Q1 going forward. But I do agree with Katie. It takes a lot of hard work to make sure that you have your house in order when it comes to your credit policies, making sure you have everything sorted with your work environment as well. That's difficult for a lot of organizations, everybody working from home. You can't really control what people are doing, when, etc. So to keep that really going, to really benefit from the efforts, the resources you have available. Automation, of course, that's my expertise area.
Sure.
I'm not here to sell anything, but generally, it's looking at your policies, what processes can you change, what can you automate to be more efficient, and also to be prepared when you have a situation like this again in the future. I think we're going to drag on for quite a while with this situation again. And there will be a lot of small organizations who will take a lot longer to recover. But if they work hard now, I guess they can come over it, in a period of time for sure. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. And it seems like, based on the news that's coming out and the different Q1 stuff that we're seeing, is that, a lot of it does depend on that industry, that size of company. How were you doing before this? All that. I mean,
Absolutely.
Kroger just announced, we're on track to double what we've already doubled in digital sales by 2023, double again. I mean, that's ridiculous. Our largest grocery chain here in the US, or grossing company. And then you've got Ford going, we had to cut production because we don't have chips, but we're not really worried about it because nobody's buying anyway. So we're going to be okay, I guess. And it's all over the place. And it's just like, well, we're not driving our cars a lot of places, so we're not replacing them, but we are buying a lot of food. People have learned to make a lot of bread in the United States.
And I think it's also just to step into that. I think that's also a big thing around, what you're saying, and depending on what industry and what kind of product or service you provide. When you provide products, your whole supply chain, how is that affected, right? When you have to resource your stuff from elsewhere on the other side of the world, and those organizations are not doing well, it's going to be a roll-on effect. So it's going to have an impact either way, for sure. It's also very good, I think, to look into that perspective in your organization.
Yeah, and I'll echo in some more statements. I think a lot of people who were on the cusp of making the decision in 2019, do I really need a credit policy? Do I really need to be running credit reports? Are feeling a lot different today, if I'm honest, than what they were before. I had a number of people that just quickly picked up the phone, okay, so I just got dropped by my insurance provider. What do I do? And I'm like, yeah, let's talk. So I think it's, the pivot was a really big term that we all heard in 2020. I think we're going to hear it again in 2021. I think we're going to continue to weather the storm together, but being a little bit more nimble and understanding your business and how you need to look at what risk you're taking is going to be super important as you look at your balance sheet and your P&L.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that leads right into kind of my next question, but we did have, some in the audience say that the cut down in production in Ford is actually affecting them negatively. So, you know, it's like, Ava, what you were saying is sometimes it's not just that one industry or that one thing. It's that ripple effect of where is it going elsewhere. Might be positive for one side, but that might end up being negative for somebody else or vice versa. So, you know, we don't always see in this economy right now how it's all going to affect everything, which is crazy. And it does lead me to ask the next question of what about the credit industry? You know, we're credit professionals. We're here, you know, as a credit group. What are we looking at as credit professionals and the credit industry in 2021? I mean, Katie, you started kind of talking into that, and I'll let you continue there. How is this looking in Q1?
Yeah, we've got to be looking at what we had as balances in Q4. We've got to be looking at spend. You know, this is the greatest macroeconomics class you're ever going to take. That's how I really feel about COVID from a business standpoint. That is, you know, I think it's really important to fully understand, okay, what are we looking to lend? What are they spending? And are they paying their bills? And not just did they pay their bills in the past, and I know that probably sounds odd to people. Yes, it's important that they paid their bills in the past, but how are they paying their bills today? Because if they're not paying right now or they're slow paying, that is a sign that something is not, you know, going so well. And I will refer back to the logistics side of this. They're all doing very well from a growth standpoint. People are shipping things, probably shipping more things today than before, being quite honest with you. Q3 and Q4 of last year for UPS, FedEx, and DHL were incredible, and that continued into Q1 because people are just buying more online and doing that. So I think it's looking at who am I going to do business with? How do I want to do business with them? And really looking at the short term of how are they faring today, right now, not putting a ton of weight on how did they pay previously. That's my personal 2 cents. You know how I roll.
There you go. So if it doesn't work out, we can always come back to you and they can come after you, right? We'll put your information up on the website. It'll be okay.
Yes.
And I actually agree there, Katie. And I think in addition to that, and I speak to a lot of organizations around their credit processes and their automation processes, etc. A lot of organizations still working very manually. But when you talk about credit policy, I'm actually always surprised how often companies say they don't have one or it's really outdated. And that also means that you're probably kind of working on autopilot, right? Your team is just doing the same thing every day and you're not really diving into it to really see what your risk is. You're just looking at numbers on paper and thinking that's okay, but you're not looking at the bigger picture. And that is really dangerous when you get an unexpected situation like COVID. And, you know, all of a sudden you have all these organizations going down and, you know, you're obviously going to suffer from that. When you could have maybe prevented it already, had you done a little bit more of a deep dive into information sources you had available, really trying to understand what you're looking at and really comparing it as well, right? And really try to compare apples with apples and pears with pears in your portfolio and not say, I have one model that fits everyone, because we hear that a lot as well. And that really doesn't work. So I think if you really want to do yourself a favor in the credit space, in your organization, go and sit down, take a look at your processes, take a look at what is old, what needs to be renewed, what is still valid. It's probably kind of a dull process, but you'll really, really benefit from it. And you'll probably see that you're doing quite a few things that you've considered normal that are probably kind of really outdated and not value adding at all, generally, but specifically not now. So I would really recommend people to consider doing that.
Yeah, so yeah. You and I did, I don't know, I've done a couple of webinars, you know, at this point.
You have, yes.
We did one though, and I remember specifically talking about appetite for risk and yes. How it's so important to write your credit policy as a working document and to sit down as an organization. I talk about sitting down quarterly, that's my recommendation. And having that be what is my appetite for risk based on what my last year looked like, last quarter looked like, how do I want to go forward? And it's a working document. So to your point, so many people make that, you know, mistake, in my opinion, of just writing a credit policy, be like, yeah, we have one of those. And if you ask the salesperson, a lot of them will say, yeah, we have one. I haven't used it. I don't know what it looks like. We don't,
right.
You know,
that sounds very familiar.
Things. If I run it up to the CEO, if there's enough sales attached to it, he pushes it through. And I'm always amazed to go, No. You need your credit collections and your sales working together on that document that's a working document so you can scale and grow. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
so agree.
So, question for the audience: with this being kind of where we're at for credit industry and credit professionals, how many of you out there does your company have a credit policy? Do you actually have a written credit policy? You can use an anonymous answer and say no if you're embarrassed, but be honest. Let us know whether you do, and if you do have one. So the first thing is yes or no, we have one or we don't, and then if you do have one, when's the last time it was updated? And I say this as selfishly as can be because we here at Credit Safe, one of my jobs, one of my projects for the end of 2020 and early 2021 has been to put together a whole how to create a credit policy. We have sample documents. We have all that type of stuff. And we're doing a webinar series coming up in the fall, late summer, all about this and why this is important, how to do it, walk you through it, all that good stuff. So yeah, I'm going to do shameless self-promotion on that. So please be on the lookout for that. And we'll go ahead and do that. But it is surprising. You're right. And we've got 2 answers so far. Other folks are typing in, I can see, and we've got a no, a yes, and we are currently looking to update. Yes, but it has been finalized or blessed off. Yes, we have a credit policy and we do update it on a regular schedule. So I mean, we have, we kind of have the whole gamut here. I'm waiting to see the yes, I think so. It's probably 20 years old type thing, but I haven't seen that one come through yet. But I mean, we're getting that type of answers here.
I'm not going to admit to it. But I also think, right, like when you create a credit policy, like, you don't want it to be like a one-pager, but you also don't want it to be like a bookwork, right? Because then people really not going to understand it. Right. And going back actually to the point, like you have to be able to share this credit policy with other internal stakeholders, and it needs to be understandable for these people so they can collaborate with you and not think, oh my God, I don't know what these credit people do. They just need me, they need to give me this credit line so I can sell something. They need to understand there's a risk there and why that risk is there and how you build it up to protect yourself against that risk. So you can capture that in a nice document that is manageable, then it's also easier to update it in the future. So
yes. And for those folks that are asking if you have help for that, yes, absolutely. You're going to have my email and you'll have the LinkedIn. We will link to both of these ladies on the landing page to their LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out to any of us. You can also get my LinkedIn on that same landing page. Feel free to reach out to any of us, any of you that want some updates or want some help with that. We have resources and tons of ways to help you with that. We did get yes, we have one, but it's outdated. So well done. Thank you for finishing the circle for us. And I won't call you out by name because you didn't do an anonymous, but thank you very much. So back to what we're talking about here. Obviously, things are changing. We're all over the map. How do you see, or do you see, businesses adapting to these challenges that they're facing? Coming out of 2020, coming into 2021, vaccines, all the different things, how do you see, and Ava, we'll start with you, how do you see businesses adapting to these challenges?
Well, obviously last year has been really tough. Everybody working from home, nobody traveling, which for a lot of businesses also a big impact there, particularly from a sales perspective, conferences, all these kind of gatherings where you can seize your opportunities to expand your business. It's all been very difficult. I think at some stage people were even a little bit webinar tired last year, to be honest.
No, not of this.
Not one. Last year.
Not of Credit Safe webinars.
Not this year.
Never.
We're all refreshed. But like, of course, every business wants to connect to the world, right? And that makes sense. But I think now people have kind of like got used to working from home. They've had the opportunity to build a structure where they can work together well and also bring the company message out there, right? In a nice way, still reaching their target audience. And that's, of course, very important. No audience, no business. So you need to keep driving this. And I think once people or businesses have this set up, they can really start fine-tuning. Again, not only on the processes or your credit policy, but you can also think about resourcing, right? How are you utilizing your people? What kind of automation processes do you have? Because this is another thing that I come across in my job very often, talking to organizations, is that they do incredible amounts of manual work. And manual work, error-prone, right? Very time-consuming. Might be kind of workable when you're in one office together and you can just give that piece of paper to the person next to you. But when you're working from home, it all needs to be online. it's all going to end up in a problem. And when you get like a dysfunctional kind of communication that way, right, then you cause yourself more issues than you already had, which is what nobody wants at this stage, right? You want to move forward, you want to be able to have a good structure. And I think automation is also very much part of this. And I think, looking forward this year, I think a lot of businesses, are recovering somewhat, or at least stable. So that will give them the opportunity to really take that deep dive and see how they can structure their business overall. Sure. And also see when are they going maybe back to the office, right? Which will also help, right? People moving back together and, collaborating again in one space. Still very forbidden here in Europe. I don't know exactly in the US how it's there right now, but I guess most people are also still working from home. So yeah, same here. We're all tired of it as well. With the cats and the kids and everything together. It is what it is. Excuse me. But I think, moving forward, I think it will improve for a lot of businesses. And I think the challenges generally will reduce somewhat. So, yeah.
Okay. And Katie, what are your thoughts on that, on the way businesses are adapting and everything right now?
So again, I'm going to use that term pivot because I think a lot of businesses are learning how to pivot. They're learning how to create sales without the face-to-face meetings. They're learning how to market themselves. I think, we were joking around before this webinar, but in all honesty, real is rare, right? And having people become their authentic selves, and going to market with that instead of this very refined approach, where it's okay for your kid to walk in on a Zoom now because it's just the world, right? So I think businesses are using that same methodology where it's just that more relaxed conversation, getting to know each other. And I feel like from a sales perspective, a lot of people are doing business with people they like to do, but like who they like generally, and not so much based upon, are you saving me money? Because it's not always about savings. You get what you pay for. I'm a big believer of that. So are my clients. It's one of those things where I think that the challenges that they're facing are how to get to market, how to pivot, and from a credit professional standpoint, which, I was thinking to myself the other day, I kind of feel like the credit people got to feel real good about their jobs about now, because it's really bringing more clarification to the balance sheet, the P&L, the financial statements, that we need these people. They need to be our eyes and ears, and we need to have this healthy balance between our sales and our back end so that we continue to hit our revenue goals and projections. And we want to be able to bring on the right business, but not end up with a big loss at the end of 2021. And I think, again, that storm is not here. I'd be interested in the audience perspective, honest to God, because I ask this to everybody, and everybody I've talked to feels the same way that I kind of see things, which is storm's not here yet. It's just kind of like it's brewing.
Lingering.
We don't know how bad it's going to be, but we see it brewing. And so far, to your point, there's been enough government funding, or maybe not enough, but a lot of government funding, a lot different than the last recession. And I think that's kind of prevented, or maybe kicked the can down the road for the storm that's to be coming. So long-winded answer to your question.
There you go. That's okay. And I'm good with that.
Yeah. In addition, because you said, it's great to be in the credit space, but I think actually from last year, it probably wasn't actually that nice to be in the credit space because I think every C-level was right on these people, right? Minimize our risk. What are you doing? We need to maintain our cash flow. We need to have a good working capital position. I think there was a lot of pressure last year on credit people, but I do agree it's probably getting a bit better now, and hopefully if they're well prepared, they're going to be ready for that storm that's coming, right? So then they can get some bonus points in.
I think some of those conference breakout sessions that I saw, 2019 and before, of how to be noticed, how to get your message across to the C-suite, those are not going to be happening when we come back and start doing in-person conferences, because everybody is, like you said, it's a great time. And Gary popped in a question, a response here, is saying, between COVID and the changing political landscape and updating updated compliance policies and all the other changes. It's a busy time for the credit industry. And that may be the best way to say it is it's busy. You're needed, you're wanted, but you're being asked to do more with less. You had to shift faster than anybody. And when things aren't going well, they're turning to you and going, why don't we have money? Where is that money coming from? What's going on? So I totally get you. It's both sides. Like you have a job, but you may not want the job that you have right now.
Definitely. Been a rough ride, I think, for many credit people.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, okay. So to bounce off of what Katie said, she'd like to know, do you see this as the storm already hit us, this storm of economic uncertainty and craziness and stuff from the pandemic, or have we yet to enter it? So there's your next question, folks. Have we already been through it? Are we in the midst of it, or is it still coming? Are we just catching it? So there's your options for it, or, come up with some other option that I didn't come up with there. But as they're giving their answers there, and we're getting quite a few like yet to enter, still coming, that, we're not there yet type thing, coming in quickly. So that seems to be the prevailing thought. Some folks are saying, "Hey, nope, it's in the past. We're coming out of it. We're gonna be rolling up." So again, we've got some different thoughts, and I think a lot of that does depend on what industry you're in, where you're living, those type of things. All of those, where your business is doing business. A lot of that is going to determine what your outlook is. So I can understand getting a bunch of different answers here. But as we're doing this and as we are looking ahead, what are some of these trends? We're starting to talk that way of this is the way 2021 is shaping up. And very few people, that was a big deal 2019 and before, by Q1, we want to know what's going to happen in Q4 of that year. I don't think many people are wanting to make quite that assertion at this point. But I'm going to ask you to give me a little bit for just in general. We'll talk credit industry here in just a minute, but kind of overall general business, economy, that type of stuff. What do you see any trends or patterns that are kind of rearing their heads and showing themselves at this point? And Katie, we'll start with you on that one.
Yeah, so I'm definitely seeing people lower the revenue goals. Trying to be a little bit modest and not go and forecast a big year because we don't know what's in store for us, right? And so I think being excited that, especially again, coming from what the last recession looked like for a lot of people, there's the fear. And so we're just kind of living in the moment and not looking so far into the future. I've heard that from so many people. And another area to think about is from a business perspective, you hit the nail on the head. The restaurant industry probably is on the other side of the storm. I would agree with that because, again, wholeheartedly, I think we're learning that COVID is not going away. It is going to be here. I'm not going to get into views of that. I'm just saying it's not going away. It's going to be here. We need to learn how to operate businesses, operate organizations with those challenging times. And it's one of those things where I think people are being optimistic, but they're not being so, the goals aren't unattainable. They're more like, hey, we took a look at the last couple of years where we just want to be consistent. We want to paddle the boat down the row and we want to make sure that there's no bumps. And if we could just have no bumps, 2021 is a goddamn good year. Like that's really how people are feeling,
From the diva's mouth. She knows she's there. Oh, and I will say we've had one, somebody that just posted a comment that I think it bears calling out right in the middle of this is, they say they think we're kind of in the midst of this because they're seeing a downward trend and a closing or a going away of some of their smaller clients and stuff like that. But now there's bigger new clients showing up. And they're gaining those bigger, larger companies as new clients that are coming to them. So they're, on one hand, they're seeing the downward and they're losing, but in the other, they're seeing that upward trend. And it's kind of like, oh, well, it's balancing out. We must be in the middle of it.
Yeah, that's a great point you bring up. And I definitely want Ava to be able to answer this question. So when you look at the small to medium-sized business sector, we are seeing them close the doors. We are seeing some of them not be able to even, get to the start, what I believe is the start of the storm. because they just weren't able to fare through this. And that's a sad thing. And hopefully small business comes back with a vengeance. That's, I shop small business. I believe in that wholeheartedly. On the other side of this is you are seeing your big Fortune 50, Fortune 500 companies really start to look at their spend and the expenses and looking at, hey, I know I've been with you for 30 years and we've been a great partnership, but am I getting the right price? Am I getting the best price? And is there areas where I could, have some additional savings? Because to your point, the C-suite and the boards of trustees are looking at things and going, we need to be prepared, and we can't be caught with our pants down, if you will, so
Absolutely.
We need to make sure that we're taking a look at everybody we're doing business with, and we like you. We want to keep doing business with you as long as you're giving us the best deal. So if I want you to be able to.
Yeah, no. I totally agree with you. And I think I have to refer a bit more to Europe here. But what we really see here is that a lot of, the government, everyone is really emphasizing to support your local businesses. So the smaller shops, to make sure they stay afloat. Of course, that's going to have an impact on the bigger ones. They can handle it somewhat, of course, but it will also make them think, right? They also want to get their numbers right and hit their targets and pay their investors. So again, it's a story on two sides, right? Everybody wants to gain one way or another. But I do think it'd be a great loss to the economy, the local economies, particularly if, the small shops are disappearing, for example. So I think it's a good thing that there is a motivation to say help these people because they represent a big chunk of a country's economy, right? And it's also employment and all these kind of things. It's a sidetrack story, but these are considerable important things, of course. Because if that goes down, these big organizations are not going to make any money either. So, and that's really something to think about. I think, companies are probably really going to try and assess this year, how to handle the situation best indeed from a revenue perspective, from a risk perspective. What resources can they use to do this? I think that's also a very big part of this process, right? Are we using the right data? Where is this data coming from? How often can we get it? These kind of things. And I think it's also really important for the credit people here on the call. If you're not using it, look into it because it is really, really important to get that data and to really maybe even get it from multiple sources, make sure that you have everything at hand to make the right decisions timely and accurately, right? To minimize any risk for yourself and your organization.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
now,
course,
credit safe customers don't have to ask where they're getting it from or if it's timely or anything like
Exactly.
that. We would never have them do that. But we even say, you need to get from multiple sources. We will happily say that every time, if you're only using us, then there's, you're hurting yourself. Not that we don't have great data, we do, but you got to know what's going on.
Exactly. It's not just the credit rating agencies I'm talking about, right? And it's not saying only use those information from those sources or multiple of those, but there's plenty of other resources you can use,
Absolutely.
Right? So, and also your insurances, be on top of it. Make sure that you know what's going on there. So if your insurance company all of a sudden comes with like a reduction, in the insurance cover, you're not going to go, oh my God, I can't handle this, be prepared.
Sure.
Yeah, but again, it goes back to that story from earlier, a bit of pilot kind of attitude when you're working sometimes, right? And you need to step away from that in these kind of difficult, risky times if you want to make this a good year, I think.
Absolutely.
But if you do that, it will definitely contribute to helping you through the year, I think, and make sure that your business gets through it. So yeah. And of course, we need to get everybody vaccinated. So people go out there again, spend, we spend, of course, everybody's buying online like crazy, which is great. But for a few companies, of course, but again, it'd be great, of course, if you can just go out again and buy from local sources,
right.
And have different kind of spending methods. Hopefully, again, the aviation business, whatever, travel, leisure, all these kind of things, it's all important, I guess. So.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, no, it takes all the different parts to make the economy run. So next question for our audience here, and then a question for you guys. With specifically focusing on for the audience, specifically focusing on onboarding new clients. Have you changed in 2021 based on 2020? Have you changed your onboarding procedures for new clients? specifically for new clients, have you done any adjustments? Have you done anything, whether it was in 2020, midway through 2020 or into 2021, have you changed that onboarding process for new clients? So love to hear that from any of you out there. You can say just yes or no, or you can give us an idea of what you have changed. And speaking of changes, for our panelists here, what do you guys see coming down the road? Gaze into your crystal balls, or, the reflection of your tiara, Katie, whatever it is. And I love getting to do that. I told Katie before this, folks, that because I don't get to see her at conferences anymore, because we've been to several conferences together, that I have to joke around with her here because it's the only chance I get. But with this, take a look forward, and specifically for the credit industry, what things do you see coming down the line for them in 2021 for the rest of the year? What do you think is coming? Either one of you, go ahead. Just go for it.
Go ahead, you can take this one first.
Right. Okay. Well, yeah, what do we see coming? Again, it's so difficult to assess at this stage, I think, right? It's so industry specific and market specific. It's difficult to say. I think, yes, there will be recovery somewhat this year. Well, here in Europe, at least, we see somewhat of a positive trend. But if they're going to maintain, or all of a sudden we're going to get like another wave of this, misery, turning everything upside down again, we don't know really, right? Because, okay, we're getting vaccinated. We're not as fast here in Europe as you are in the US. It may take a bit longer for everybody to be, vaccinated. And that's a really big thing, right? So, because then there is a risk that something may go wrong again in the summer or whatever. And then we may see a downturn again for businesses. Let's hope that's not going to happen, of course, fingers crossed. But I think, to be honest, yeah, we do definitely expect a happier year this year business-wise than we've seen last year. But I think it's driven because companies now know what the situation is, right? They know what they're in and they have an opportunity to handle it. The question is, how do you handle it? What do you want to achieve, right? What's your objective as an organization? And how much are you willing to spend on that, right? Are you willing to spend on resourcing? Are you willing to review your FTE base? Are they doing the right job? Do you have the right amount of people on board, or do you have too many? That's another cost picture, of course. And these are not nice things to talk about, but they're necessities, if you want to make it through the year safely. So I think this is a year where people can really reflect, or organizations can really reflect on their structure, their processes, their investments, their cost picture, and see what is my goal for later this year. I would go back to Katie's point earlier. Don't be, over enthusiastic. Be a bit more modest this year, I guess, for an outlook. But I think if you would do these things in combination, you probably get through this year. And I reckon 2022 is probably a year, hopefully, where we really see an upwards curve globally as well. And again, going back to the beginning of this story, when you think about supply chain, etc., when it goes good on the other side of the pond or the other side of the world, that may also help you, getting better business results. So all in all, I think we all need to collaborate one way or another, globally, to ensure that we're all staying afloat and we have the least impact from this long-term disaster. So
right.
Yeah.
Right. And we're seeing, in the answers right now, we have, folks saying that they are making those adjustments. They are making changes.
Good.
Some of them aren't, but a lot of them are, whether it was because of fraud issues or just an extra caution. They wanted to kind of make things a little different, maybe update them. And, I can't see all the backgrounds of why they've done everything, but, we are seeing most folks have been updating, at least in the recent history, their onboarding process and things like that. So it kind of speaks to what you're talking about there, Eva.
Yeah, and I think, and it's really important what you just say now, right? So you say some people have done it, some people haven't, and
right.
Of course, again, we're all working remotely, so that doesn't make it any easier to do this, right? To achieve it, to look at your processes, to think, what can you change? Is everything okay? But this is kind of the principle, like you make some effort now and you're really going to have a long-term benefit, right? Instead of thinking, I'll do a little bit now and I'll do a little bit in 3 months and then a little bit, and then eventually it just fizzles out, right? And you haven't done anything with anything. and you've made some effort for nothing, basically. That's such a shame, right? So I think you're better off really saying, okay, we're going to put some committee together and just do it, right? And make a first pass, and then we'll amend it as we go along. Rather than saying we're not doing it, or we're only having one person sorting this out somewhere in the office or from home office, and we're hoping for the best, because I think that is probably not going to be a great structure to handle this kind of situation.
Yeah.
But I would definitely recommend, particularly on due diligence processes, for example, as well. How are you doing your things? Capture it, review it, process it, and work on it constantly. Review it constantly.
Sure.
You will need
Katie,
it in the next year.
what are your thoughts on this?
No, I'll give a different perspective because I do appreciate your supply chain review and everything. So I think you're going to see the credit insurance providers tighten up the reins a little bit more than even what they've done already. And for those that don't know what that looks like, if you had your cost for credit insurance double in 2021, that's what that looks like. That's tightening it up for them. Also, if you're seeing more denials, that's another thing that I've heard a lot from clients is we're being denied on these lines. We're getting much smaller lines for what we need to extend. And it's starting to put that little, ebb and flow on, the relationship, I think. So, my advice in those situations is turn to your vendor references, make sure that you're running those. A lot of people weren't doing that in 2020 because, for whatever reason they weren't. My belief is run those vendor references. I know most of the time you think you're just getting everybody who they're paying on time. That's not always the case. So I preach that. I also would say, keep looking at that credit policy and keep looking at it on a quarterly basis and have it be a working document. I can't stress that enough. If it's not a working document where you're really looking at what are our revenue goals, or, even if it's trying to stay status quo, making sure that goes in line with what we're extending and working together. And this is not the time to have those non-adversary relationships between credit and collections and sales. It's just not. So it's the time to have a collaborative effort. And if you're a C-suite executive sitting on this call, it starts at the top. You need to make sure that you're sending that message from the top down, that you're lockstep with your credit, professionals and giving that advice. And if you're a credit professional on this call, I would say make sure that you're sitting down with your CFO, your CEO, and saying, here's why we need to do this. This is what I'm hearing on these calls. This is what I'm seeing out in the economy and scale and plan. This is what it needs to look like. So that's my 2 cents.
Well, there you go. I like it.
There as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got an audience comment that I want to get to here. If you guys have any questions on the audience, please feel free to drop them in here real quick. And then I have one other question for you guys. This person says, they're seeing a lot more fintech companies getting involved in the collections and credit functions, and taking on the risk and helping with that onboarding of clients in, a very short amount of time, a much more automated process and everything like that. Is that something you're seeing? I mean, Ava, that's the world you work in. So, all the time are you seeing a lot more of that as we're getting into 2021?
Absolutely. Compared to last year, we spoke briefly before we started this webinar, right? And I already said, last year it was tough for most businesses. Businesses didn't want to invest in anything, so definitely not in automation, particularly not knowing how to actually operate right now. So, if they haven't sussed that one out first, then it's already difficult to want to automate anything. But now, all of a sudden, Q1 this year, we really see this uptake. Businesses saying, okay, we have taken a look at how we're operating. We have looked at the number of FTEs we're having. We think we can do things differently, more efficient, and we want to have a centralized place in our ERP that we use, or in the cloud, whatever it is, but where we can have this information readily available for the people who need to work with it, but also, as Katie just said, to collaborate with the other internal stakeholders, right? To be able to produce instant records. Why are you doing it? How are you doing it? When are you doing it? So everybody can benefit, because ultimately we're all part of that end-to-end process to get the sale, right? And you can do this the most efficiently if you can share accurate information. You can build your case, and automation obviously really helps in this, right? If you have to write everything out on your email and then print everything off, it's going to take forever. And again, it's error prone. So I would also definitely recommend for those organizations, who are doing things very manually, have a think about what could I actually, automate. And you don't need to automate everything in one go, but you can start with little things, right? And you will see it brings benefits, and then you can do it at a late stage on a bigger scale. Because of course, again, companies are kind of reluctant a little bit to invest, particularly smaller companies, I think. But it's worthwhile in the longer run. You will get a return for it. So definitely something worthwhile looking at. Yeah.
Perfect. So my last question for both of you, and Katie, it's going to be to you first. Is a little two-parter here. One, looking forward now. We've looked back at Q1. Let's look forward at the rest of 2021 for all the credit professionals that are listening in here and all these folks. One piece of advice going forward, and one bit of encouragement for them as they go, because we've kind of had this impending doomsday storm coming. So let's give them something positive here. One piece of advice that you could give them going forward that'll help out in the rest of the year, and then one kind of piece of positivity that they can take with them as well.
Yeah. So, well, one thing I will say is that AI, artificial intelligence, and machine learning is such an incredible thing, and my clients are tapping into that and looking at those services so that they can do more with the group that they have, instead of having to staff a bunch of people that they don't have the payroll to do today. So they're looking to get that return by making the investment off what they're yielding today. So I would say look at tech, look at fintech. And that's a really big thing to not turn away from today. This is not the time to not be looking at those resources. And then secondly, I would say, listen, the greatest thing is we're here, we're having this conversation. That's a huge positive in my eyes. As well as I do think that this is going to create opportunity. For every storm, it creates opportunity. And so as much as we've talked about the impending storm, which for anybody who knows me personally, I am a very positive individual. So when I talk about that brewing of the storm, I'm talking about it from a sense of it's a positive thing, because we're going to learn something from it. We're going to become a better, healthier organization as we grow and we scale and we come up with other challenges that we didn't have these solutions for. A lot of companies didn't have the ability to have their workforce 100% at home prior to this pandemic, and a lot of companies now can do that. So while COVID was a horrible thing, we lost lives, and I feel bad for those families that are impacted and those friends, and I think we got to look at the positive, and it's taught us to appreciate what we have. It's taught us to appreciate the business that we have to sell every single day. And like for the credit professionals, just you are in a place where I think you're going to be able to shine more than ever in the next coming 12 months. So that's
there you go. And Ava, what about you?
So piece of advice, well, obviously, again, automation, I think it's really, really key. That credit policy and that automation, we keep repeating it, but it is the key thing in credit, right? You want to minimize that risk, you want to maximize those revenues, be on top of it. So that will be my advice. Probably a bit boring because we already mentioned it so often, but take it on board. And the positive, I have to join Katie here. I'm also a positive person. I think, every negative brings a positive. I think the fact that, you still have a job, you're here in this webinar, so that's a great thing on its own, whether you work in credit or not when you're here today. If you are going to be working in credit, this is indeed your opportunity. You're going to shine, that depends on you, I think, on your attitude, on what you're going to do with it. But it's definitely a chance given. So to prove that, if a company can sit through what we've had the last year and a half nearly, then they can handle so much, right? So things can only go upwards if you get the right spirit together between your staff, you're on the same line, you have a vision and a good goal, then I think you can definitely achieve a lot. And I think most companies will definitely get there as well, because there are so many good people out there who work really hard, even if they struggle working from home with the kids and the dogs and everything else that's going on. People do it, and I think people should be very proud of themselves, putting through this. And we'll get out of here and see each other again in offices and conferences, and everybody's going to become happy, So,
that's right.
And then we'll see all these people shine, right, with all their achievements. So I think it's doable, definitely.
There we go.
And I do really wish for people and companies to get there as well. So definitely.
Absolutely, yeah. We're all here to help businesses succeed and see the best for them. So 100% on that. So. Yeah. Ladies, thank you so much. This has been a great discussion. We're going to wrap it up at this point. We look forward to seeing you next time. Have a great one, everybody.